computer. Hello, I'm Liliane Grace, author of Empowering Books and Programs for the Conscious Family, and I'm here with one of my mentors and inspirations, Dr. John Demartini, for another fascinating interview. The purpose of this interview is to explore the difference between your model, Dr. Demartini, the evolutionists' model, and the creationists' model. So I'll do a little blurb for our listeners to understand where we're going with this, and then I'll hand over to you. So Richard Dawkins famously wrote The Blind Watchmaker, why the evidence of evolution shows a universe without design. But Darwin admitted that if intermediate species could not be found, his whole theory of evolution was in danger. The Judao-Christian model is of a creator God creating everything in 7 days, which many modern people find impossible to believe. You were inspired by the German philosopher Gottfried Leibniz, whose vision was of a divine order, and you dedicated your life to finding that order. You arrived at the point of realizing that God truly is the Grand Organised Design or designer, and you developed a methodology so that anyone can find God or that order in their lives. So intelligent design is described in Wikipedia as a pseudoscience. So I discovered when I learnt about philosopher of science, Stephen Meyer, who's another advocate of intelligent design and author of books like Return of the God Hypothesis and Darwin's Doubt. Please share with us your thoughts about the meeting point between your model of divine order, the evolutionists' godless model, and the creationists' godly model. Thank you.
Just quickly answer that.
Exactly. Like, you know, you can do it. You can do it. I believe in you.
Do you mind if I develop this a little bit so I can put it in context?
Be my guest.
For millennia, going back to Heraclitus, depending on how you want to pronounce him, he said that there was a unity of pairs of opposites. And that Zeno, another philosopher, was supposedly the founder of the dialectic method, which is a series of arguments, propositions that people of opposite views take to argue against each other's views, to make both of them come to a point to see both sides and find a synthesis between the thesis and antithesis.
Yeah.
This synthesis of pairs of opposites through the centuries has been a cornerstone of the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of wisdom. And so just about every position an individual can take, there's somebody out there with an opposite position: pro-life, pro-abortion, pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine, and other types of pairs of opposites. And there is an empirical sensory inductive mechanistic model, and then there's a deductive a priori model to balance this a posteriori model. And they've been in dialectic for way before even Christianity and way before Darwin. Darwin's in the 19th century. Christianity goes back before that, of course. But this idea has been going on. These models have been going on way back. Now, Dawkins, and let me step back. Both of these propositions are opinions, synthesizing, trying to find a truth. It's like Aristotle said that when you have an excess of information and a deficiency of information in a subjective bias in a form of opinion, they counterbalance each other to try to get to an objective truth. That's what the dialectic was for. At least it was the idea. Now there's pitfalls to it because you can only approximate it. You never quite get there unless you can actually get a synthesis. Hegel later described that you could get to a synthesis, but you can't do that in time. You can only do that if you took time out and put them at the same moment. Now, I was fascinated by both science and religion since I was 18. And I set out to try to find a synthesis between the two. I believe that something that's true in science should not match something that's true in religion. There may be different approaches to approaching the universe, but they ideally should come to the same point. So Dawkins slants on the materialistic, physicalist, mechanistic, materialist kind of view, which is a classical opinion of a Darwin as it is today. And then you got some people who are more on the religious side that have their opinions and their things. Both of them are subjectively biased. I won't include anything that I learn over here on the design model. Any of their arguments are just pooed, throw out. And I won't listen to anything over here on this evolutionary model because it doesn't match what my belief is. So they're starting from a subjective bias, even though they're very respected scientists many times on both ends. They have prestige in their circles, but they're not necessarily really objective, because otherwise they'd be trying to find a way of linking them instead of trying to prove that that's wrong and this is wrong. It's just like in politics, you have, in America, for instance, you have the Democrats and Republicans. And there are people that have a synthesis and have a middle ground and don't see the pros without the cons here and don't see the pros without the cons here. And they can synthesize it and say, you know, the truth is we need a little of both. We need some capitalism and socialism, and a little of both to make this thing work. But capitalists say, no, socialists are the problem, and socialists say capitalists are the problem. And that's what we have in this debate. And so it is easy for me to see the blindness on both ends. The design end has really some weak arguments in some cases, and also has some brilliant arguments. And over here on this side over here, there's lots of missing gaps in Darwin's idea. And if you go and read the misinterpretations of natural selection and Darwinism and genetic drift and these other models that are involved in creating evolutionary theory, you'll see that there's still some gaps, and there's presuppositions, and there's an opinion that it will be filled in and will prove it. So they're both faith-based systems, even though one's supposedly the scientific method, and the other one is also. Now, Stephen has done a great job at trying to argue his points. And he, in my opinion, in looking at it, he has some areas that are a little gray. And Dawkins, I've had personal experience with Dawkins because I have a student that I had that ended up getting to work with him as his assistant. And he used to send me, and we'd have debates by email between myself and Richard. So I've had some fun with him over the years. So I know firsthand of the bias that are there. And I'm sure I have my bias. I don't know of too many people that can really go through. There are nearly 200 known biases that a human being with their senses have to pass through in the elusive, hallucinative world of the senses that we have to go through, that empiricism is based on. And the ancient Greek philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, and these guys, these used logic and they used reason, and they tried to theoretically come up with answers. And religion was birthed out of that. Christianity, Judaism, even Islam has a lot of Aristotle and some Plato and Socratic teachings in it. So you can see that there's sort of a distinction between our senses and our deductions, our assumptions and metaphysical questions. Now, every time you go to a boundary of what you know, the time and space horizons of what you know, you always have a boundary of what you don't know. And so you have physics of laws that we seem to know, at least we think we know for a while, and sometimes even those get disrupted. And then we have sort of a metaphysical question, speculations out there. There's theoretical physics and there's practical physics. And theoretical physics has to contemplate the cosmos. How did the universe come about? We don't know. All we have is the evidence, and outside that evidence, we have opinions and theories and things of this nature. So when it comes to my journey, when I was 18 years old, I asked my mom, what exactly is a genius? And she said, someone like people like Albert Einstein and Da Vinci. I said, well, get me everything you can get on those guys. And so I pulled out a book by Einstein when I was 18 with a dictionary. And it was on Brownian movement. and he was observing water from a little ditch and putting it under, microscope and looking at and filtering it out and having little debris in this water, and it was moving, and it was random movements. And then he filtered it and filtered and found an individual movement of one little particle in it. And then he could, when he got it down to one, he could get it down to where there was some sort of order to it. He figured out the forces of it. When you added 2, it's twice as complex. When you add 3, it's 6 times complex, 3 times 2 times 1. When you add the 4th particle, it's 24 times complex. When you add the 5th, it's 5 times 24. And whatever that number is, when you add the 6, it's 6 times that. And every time you add another particle, you get what they call a factorial mathematical progression of complexity. This complexity now becomes overwhelming for human minds to grasp. And it is also something even algorithms of computers struggle with when it gets to very high numbers. Now, this led to the idea that randomness or disorder, which is what atheist scientists like to think there is behind the universe, sort of an entropic randomness. And it's only by survival of the fittest that allows this people to make these species live. Claude Shannon said that missing information that we don't know, that's an unknown, that missing information is the foundation of disorder. And therefore, it can't have some sort of intelligent structure to it. But if we were to know that information, we might discover a hidden order in the chaos. Now, Boltzmann, later on in his work on thermodynamics and gases, he said that the probabilistic, stochastic idea of probability and disorder is not the final conclusion. This probability is simply our understanding of it as today, and it's very possible that there may be a deeper awareness as we come along, that we may find an order in this so-called chaos, this randomness. Well, so that made me go into study Leibniz. I read his Discourse on Metaphysics. I read his Monadology, Theodicy. And even though he was a philosophical guy, he was also the founder of the calculus alongside Newton. They didn't do it, well, not alongside, but at the same time. So he was a mathematician, but he was also a philosopher, a metaphysician, and also a theologian. So he believed that there was a hidden order in the universe, and others at the time questioned it because it was a complexity. So there was 2 camps, a dialectic. Was there complexity or is there order? And is the difference between it just our lack of understanding? Well, Leibniz did a little experiment with some students, and he took, students, and he said, now put random dots on a piece of paper, just randomly, but count the number of dots of 20 and make sure that they're in sequence, and you write the sequence in which they are. So whatever you randomly put it, just write the numbers next to it so I know the sequence. And then you assume it's random. And everybody in the room put a different sequence. And then he calculated the function of X versus Y, a Cartesian grid on it. And he found the order and put a math to it. And their minds were blown. How could he come up with something that had a mathematical order that they thought was random? And that just messed with my head. So Leibniz's idea made me say, well, and Einstein's idea, and even Boltzmann's idea, and then Clausius's idea, those ideas were that there may be still a hidden order in this chaos. We just don't have the data. Claude Shannon, with 2 other guys who got a Nobel Prize, created information theory. And information theory said that entropy, the tendency to go to randomness from order to disorder, was missing information. So then I thought, okay, when we have a subjective bias, we're conscious of some things and we're unconscious of others. That's what a subjective bias means. When you're infatuated with somebody, you're conscious of the upsides and you're unconscious of the downside. When you're resentful to somebody, you're conscious of the downsides, unconscious of the upsides. When you love somebody, you're fully conscious of both sides. And you see the hidden order, and there's nothing to change of you relative to them or them relative to you. So when you have Richard Dawkins, he's conscious of the things that match his model, and he's unconscious of things that Stephen Myers put together. And Stephen's conscious of the things that he matches his model, and he's unconscious of the things that are there. So I see both of them, and unless there's a dialectic synthesis, which is usually not the case, 2 men get together and they have a debate, it really is a rhetorical persuasion of their opinions onto the other instead of actually a true dialectic where you learn from each other. That's rarely the case. It's just people arguing their points.
Yeah.
So that's where the stagnation is. It's not that the stagnation is actually inherent in the universe. True science and religion actually have an order to it, but the biases that we have in our subjective belief systems are many times the problem. And that's why these things are debating. So I was interested in finding the hidden order in the apparent disorder. And so I started to, and I was interested in the relationship in human behavior, because my work is in human behavior. My work is on the evolvement of human consciousness and on maximizing human awareness and potential. And if we look very carefully, each individual has a set of priorities in their life based on the voids that they have, based on the judgments they have. When they're infatuated with somebody, they're unconscious of the downsides. When they're resentful to somebody, they're unconscious of the upsides. Whenever they're unconscious, they're too proud or too humble to admit what they see in others inside themselves, and they have disowned parts. And these disowned parts are empty voids that drive their values, that determine their path in life. So everybody has a set of priorities, a set of values in their life, and whatever's highest on their priority is where they have the greatest degree of awareness of order. And whatever's low on their values, they have the greatest degree of disorder. So then I found out, as long as we're under bias, we're not living by our highest value where we're most objective, and we're holding on to our perceptions and sides. Hold on one second. Yes. Can we do it in about 30 minutes, 40 at 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock. Pardon me. Thank you. Pardon me. They want to do something that would be disturbing to us. Pardon me for that. Whoever's listening out there, that
That's
they're putting a new railing on my balcony. So, so if we're living by our highest values, we have more objectivity. Objectivity means non-partial, non-biased interpretation of reality. And when we're living in our lower values, we're more subjectively biased, which means opinionated and biased, and we're missing information. So when somebody is living and has a bias already, they're automatically pushing that bias onto people. And so what I think that an atheistic, mechanistic, materialistic, physicalistic scientists are not against intelligence in the universe. They're against anthropomorphic deification that was set up as a result of a compensation from dissociation from fears that people fantasize about to protect them, and they create artificial gods. There are thousands of gods that have been eliminated already in the universe because we've moved forward and we've become aware of our fears, so we don't create these gods. And so there's a lot of anthropomorphic gods that are basically compensations for phobias in our life that we use to protect us and propitiate us from our anxieties. The atheists are against those because those are easily refutable, and they're basically fantasies that human beings create in their mind as a dissociation. But there's a field of science that some of the greatest scientists have been panpsychics. Panpsychics says that within a fundamental level, more fundamental than space, time, energy, and matter is consciousness. And they believe that consciousness underlies all the laws of physics. And the panpsychics, like Einstein, actually had some panpsychic philosophies in some of his work. Max Planck, Erwin Schrödinger, Thomas Nagel, Plato definitely had that. I could go down, I have a list of over 250 well-known scientists that have left their mark in the world, Sir Isaac Newton, that believed that there was an intelligence in the universe and there was a rational order to the universe, and that scientists could go and find it and find this mathematical expression. And they didn't want to personify it and put an anthropomorphic deity on it. They just wanted to acknowledge its inherent nature, laws of the universe, which is an intelligent system, without putting a design with some anthropomorphism on it, or even zoomorphism. No scientist would pursue and get a Nobel Prize and work 30, 40, or 50, or 60 years trying to find the laws that govern a behavior if they didn't believe there was some sort of rational order in the universe that transcends the idea of randomness. So there's obviously even scientists that are atheists against anthropomorphic deities are not atheists in the sense that there's a rational order in the universe that we can find and we can then create laws of the universe based on it. So I really believe that there is at a deeper level, a deeper strata of awareness, an intelligence that's in the universe, but I don't want to personify it and give it an anthropomorphic deification, which is where the problem is in some of the religious connotations. They want to make an anthropomorphic deity out of it, a bearded guy in the sky kind of mentality. But the idea that there may be intelligence, we know that there's a conservation of information in the universe. Even the stuff that goes into black holes, even Leonard Susskind from Stanford and Perimeter, he believes that the information that goes into black holes is not lost. It goes out and creates new stars. And there may be recycling of stars and all the information from a previous star into the next, for all we know. And we know that there's a conservation of energy and matter and angular momentum and many other things, as Nether's theorem of symmetry. So if that's the case, then this information, this intelligence is stored. And I went to the Institute of Advanced Studies and met with Freeman J. Dyson before he passed away. I met with him 3 times. And he said in 1993, August edition of Scientific American, if all of a sudden there was a so-called Big Bang and there was a heat death and a thermodynamic equilibrium, what would happen to all the information and intelligence that's there? And he said it would be stored in charged particles of light. And charged particles of light can be entangled, and they have a sort of a deterministic order behind them. So if you go probing into the mysteries of these questions, my conclusion is that there is a way of accessing the hidden order in the apparent chaos and extract, as Aristotle would say, meaning out of those pairs of opposites. Now, we give it the meaning we interpret it. It's our own meaning. It's not an inherent meaning of the universe, as Camus argued against, but it is still there. And you know that I've developed in the breakthrough experience the Demartini method, which I've been working on for almost 50 years. And that the whole purpose of that is to find the hidden order in it. And I found that if we bring symmetry to our perceptions and hold ourselves accountable to see both sides of a perception, and actually have a synthesis of perception, we discover hidden order in things. And when we do, we have a tear-jerking state, a transcendent state, a nominal state that Immanuel Kant described, a transcendent state from our immanent senses, where we actually can see the hidden order and access it. We have tears of gratitude and appreciation and a feeling of love and a feeling of inspiration and a feeling of certainty and a feeling of presence that makes us feel like a communion with this intelligence. It's almost like the human will now matches the laws of the universe, the infinite order, or if you want to personify it, the divine master plan. I believe that there's a way of demonstrating this order in our life, which is not religious, because it's not anthropomorphic deities that they see in Judeo-Christianity, Islam, and these kind of things, or even Buddhist ideas. And it's not a fighting science. There's a merging of those, and it's at the quantum world where there's no arrow of time that this can occur. So there's a way of actually accessing a way of and demonstrating the hidden order in the apparent chaos to make you pause for thought that maybe there's an intelligence in the universe that's going on. If I take William James' stream of consciousness and sliver it into infinitesimals and take each moment you perceive something and find out whatever you perceive, whatever your bias is, and hold you accountable to transcend the bias and find the other side and balance it, you get this experience where you have certainty and presence and a tear of gratitude, and you know that there was a hidden order in what happened in your life. That is accessible, and scientists are not using that tool, and religious peoples could, but they're not, because it doesn't match their paradigm. Neither one of them have the paradigm to allow for this symmetry of the mind. And because they didn't believe you could actually get to symmetry. And that's because of the law of causality. The law of causality, which is a false, murky attribution of causes onto things externally to us, is keeping us from seeing these two sides simultaneously. Because you have to put the essential self into the existential self, where you divide things in space and time and cause causalities. And that's the block. The problem between science and religion is the law of causality. That's the very foundation of science. And Carl Jung tried to address in his time when he talked with Wolfgang Pauli about the coincidence and synchronicities and acausal states of the mind. It's in that acausal state where science and religion join. And there's a way in. and there's a way of demonstrating it. And that's been my life's work. And I've developed that in the Demartini method and in the breakthrough experience to help people get a glimpse of that. So they don't have to take a side. They don't have to be biased and fight and argue about it. There's a way of accessing it. It's purely scientific, but it's also a mystical experience. It's a spiritual experience for people. So I believe that true science and true religion don't fight. There is a synthesis in the dialectic, and Dawkins is overlooking it, and most theologians are overlooking it. Although they're attempting to try to bridge it, but there's still biases in there. And you can see them. If you've got a background enough and a broad enough background, you can see the biases in both. Yeah. And so Stephen has some, even though he's a brilliant guy, and Dawkins has some, even though he's a brilliant guy, but they just don't want to acknowledge the other side, and they don't want to see that there's this way of having a synthesis.
So when Darwin was making that comment about the intermediate species, that if they're found, that would, really prove his model, but they haven't been found yet, from what I understand. So does that undermine the evolution model, do you feel, because they're not there? Can you give me an example, in other words, of one of the blind spots that Dawkins has and one of the blind spots that Stephen Meyer has? You're mute, right? On purpose? Yeah. Okay. We'll wait a moment.
Pardon me, the captain is making an announcement, and I didn't quite hear everything you said, and pardon me for these interruptions. I did not know these were going to have.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Let's do the question. Let's do the question again.
We go with the flow with life. Okay, so what I was saying was Darwin, with his thing about intermediate species, that, without the intermediate species, that sort of undermines his model, of evolution and the survival of the fittest, that. So what, can you give an example of one of Dawkins' blind spots and one of Stephen Meyer's blind spots? What kinds of things are they not seeing?
Well, there was an article, I'd have to go dig up the actual reference on it, an article on intelligence in the cell level. And the idea of an evolution from a single cell all the way up to human beings is presupposed, but we don't typically call intelligence until we get to a human level. Animal intelligence is sort of just reflexes and, not real intelligence. But some believe you can take intelligence all the way down to the quantum level. Freeman Dyson believed that there was a panpsychic intelligence at all levels, and there were just different degrees and gradations of this intelligence. And also, when it comes to evolution, when does it begin? If you got molecules that are intelligent, that are evolving through self-organizing or, emergent systems, at what point does Darwin begin? Does Darwin begin at when genes are formed? Prokaryotic cells. Is there Darwin when you are dealing with biomolecules forming the genes through a template on clay and thermo spouts out of the ocean or something when they do it? At what point does Darwin begin? This is still a fuzzy area. Right. And then what happens is you have things like the missing links, right? Now the creationists want to say there's a grass model that every species is created by God individually. And Darwin was a tree model originally. The tree model's been thrown out. No one uses the tree model anymore. But the bush model is halfway between religion and science. If it goes towards grass, every species independently created. If it goes towards a tree, there's an evolution to it. And a bush model is that there's some species that were once thought to be in lineage that are now found to be simultaneously living. So that threw out the original Darwinian tree model. Yeah. So do they have species that are intermediate between species and species? Yes. How close? Well, it may be hundreds of thousands of years. So you could then come in with an argument from the religious person, that's still a different species. And it is. But the comparative anatomy and comparative physiology, comparative enzymology, and comparative genetics shows that there's a sequence there, there's a gap, but it's not a big gap. So the question is how transition is it? How big is a transition? Do we need to have a transition that's 100,000 years, a million years, 10,000 years, 1,000 years? Is it fast enough? Can we account for it? Do we see evolution today? We're seeing a thicker earwax. We're seeing different changes in blood sugars. We're seeing changes as we're here in the last 100 years. So there's evidence for Darwin, but there's also weak, because those transitional segments are presupposed to match the bias and the faith in the evolutionary model, and they'll find those over time. And then they argue that you can't find some of them because there aren't going to be found all the different paleontological fossil records. You're not going to find them all. So you're just presupposed. So that's a weak area there, but it's a presupposed we'll find them, or they don't exist because nature has eliminated them through acids and moisture, and the bones have been eroded, and bugs. So that's their argument why they don't have it, but they also have an argument that's weak proving it. Even though we have comparative enzymology and comparative things, there is an indication of it, a very strong indication of it. And if you look at gestation and ontogeny, you'll see that there's a very strong indication that we pass through the evolutionary process in our genes. And we know that various illnesses are regressions to earlier toolkits of ancient DNA applications. So there's a tremendous amount of evidence for the evolutionary model. But there's also weaknesses that have gaps that the creationist model like to pick on. But the creationist model don't have an explanation other than a supernatural thing. God created these things. So as long as they don't have a real mechanism of how it occurs, they're always going to have a rebuttal. There's no way, and they're just presupposing a supernatural God, some anthropomorphic deity decided to create a poof, an animal. And so that approach does not work in science. Because they're living in causality. You've got to say a cause has to have a cause, and it has to have a cause and a chain of causalities back to an infinite original cause. Now you can come up with a God in the Big Bang and say, well, then somehow there's an intelligence that created that, maybe in a quantum vacuum that they call it, and there's particles and nanoparticle vacuums that are creating this whole thing. But you still have that weakness. Both have their weaknesses. I've been looking at those weaknesses for decades, and I can see arguments for and against. And I personally believe that more fundamental inside nature is an intelligence. If you go and study the atom and you look at the orbitals of the atom and the positions of the probabilities of the distribution of these atoms in order to make chemistry, it's awe-inspiring. It's ordered like unbelievable at the most subtle level. And if you look at even the models of how the universe came from the Big Bang model, even though I'm not a subscriber complete to, I think there's ad hoc, additions and flaws in that thing all over the place. Even so, there's awe-inspiring, subtle levels of order in there that you just go, if this is a random universe, that's an amazing randomness, how those things came about and how the probabilities of it. There's a fine tuning structure on all the physical constants that are in the universe, the probabilities of all those physical constants coming together exactly in the numbers that they have in order to make life occur, forced Darwinian evolutionists and materialists to come up with another theory, the multi-universe theory, where we have an infinite number of universe, and then you collapse the wave function, and one universe occurred with all these different things, and it's one out of an infinite number, one of them happened to have life in it. Well, that's weak, but it's an argument to counterbalance the fine-tuning structure and the anthropic principle that the universe seems to be designed for making life. There's the Nobel Prize winner in France right now that is now demonstrating in water, in the memory of water, there's an inherent system to make DNA molecules. And he's the one that found the AIDS virus. I mean, he's the one that found HIV. He's the discoverer. He got a Nobel Prize. He's looking at the idea that inherent in nature, in a field of intelligence in nature, DNA is able to be manifested in water. The electrical fields there have this to encourage life.
Is that Luke
what
Montagnier?
He's saying? Yeah, Luke. So if he's coming along and saying that leads again towards an idea that's a scientific principle that leads toward an intelligence and a panpsychic intelligence. that life is actually inherent in the universe. Now we could say, well, where did that come from? And we could play with causality again. So I think there's plenty of arguments that make it gray. And I think that the reason why they keep arguing about it is because of these subjective biases. They just want to hold on to their Democratic and their Republican view instead of actually really, truly synthesizing that. And I'm a centrist in that respect. I have no problem seeing the value of the science and the religion. I've been trying to merge those two all these years. I don't see a separation. I think there's a way of demonstrating that there's things called photoreceptivity and photoreceptive biomolecules that in the body that respond to electrical fields, electromagnetic fields, of subtle microvolts, and the earth is surrounded by them. And so our molecules in our body are responding to these fields. And those fields around the world, around the earth, that are in the atmosphere from atomic relays and receiving and broadcasting system, from cosmic rays, solar waves, and everything else, it appears that these fields have intelligent systems that impact biomolecules. We know the sun, when it's UV light, can affect vitamin D formation from the steroids in our skin. That was one of the earliest biomolecules, but there's hundreds of them that have emerged now. So we're now a body undergoing an impact from fields. So we have a top-down and a bottom-up mechanism. And from a scientific perspective, we see it emerging from, atoms all the way up through an evolutionary process. From top down, we see it the other way. There's evidence for both. And I don't see why people have to argue over it. I just see them biased. And so I pay very little attention. I extract knowledge from them because some of their arguments are pretty good. But I don't see that. I don't take a side on this. I see that there's a hidden order in life that's there that scientists would not even be in existence if they didn't have the belief in. But it's not necessarily the anthropomorphic order that comes from some anthropomorphic deity. It's a more permeative energy. I mean, when you stop and think about it, God is not a Jew. He's not a Christian. He's not a Buddhist. He's not a Hindu. He's not a Muslim. He's none of those things, or it, or she, or it, or whatever you want to call it. It can't be that. That's a very finite, infinitesimal viewpoint of an intelligence of the universe. This intelligence would have to be literally universal, galactic, supergalactic, Laniakea, cosmic web. It would have to be a universal field. And there's now scientists that are looking at magnetic fields. Do they have the source of this intelligence, electromagnetism? And if you study it even down to a cell in cancer, you can see that if you have a different ratio of donors versus acceptors, you can cause a cell to proliferate or stop proliferating. And it's based on electrical fields and the potential difference, the transmembrane potential that's sitting there, which is electronic, which is magnetic. So there may be some sort of a magnetic and electrical field mechanism that's inherent in the universe that is even more, and there's something even more fundamental to that, beyond the strong and weak nuclear force, a unified field that maybe, as Wheeler said, Wheeler was a scientist. He worked there across from Einstein and even Freeman Dyson until more recently, about 20 years ago. And he believed that there was love. The whole universe was made out of love. The four elements in Empedocles in the centuries before 6th century BC, he said there was fire, air, water, and earth, which meant rarefaction, condensation, movements of the winds and of the earth. And Aristotle used that, and he believed that there was a synthesis of that, which he called love, which was quintessence. Aristotle talked about this. Wheeler picked it up, and Wheeler was one of the most advanced scientists in recent times, and had worked with massive things in nuclear physics and cosmology, and was on the one that was involved in black holes and wormholes and all kinds of things. So here's a guy that basically at University of Texas, which I have his notes, said that the universe seems to be made out of love. From a scientist. I thought that was pretty amazing. I got his notes and they're still sitting in my drawer to this day, and I'm still trying to decipher what he said because it's a profound thing. So here's a scientist that was able to merge those two, and there's plenty of them that are attempting to do that. But for some reason, most people have a polarity.
Would you repeat his name, Dr. Demartini? Could you repeat the name of
John Archibald Wheeler. He believed in a participatory universe, that we participated in the universe, and 7.8 billion human beings are all perceiving different universes, and they have their measurement of the universe and interaction with the universe is impacting the universe.
Yeah.
But he said that when we have a balanced state, see, the Greeks said if you see more similarities and differences, you infatuate. If you see more differences and similarities, you resent. If you see the two together in a perfect balance, support and challenge, kind and cruel, all pairs of opposites, and balance it, where maximum growth and development has been proven to occur in biology, you have love. And he says that love is a synthesis and synchronicity of complementary opposites inherent in nature, and all the other complementary opposites that make people take sides are existential projections from possibly love, which is almost a theological construct, but it's a scientific treatise.
So is he also saying we're kind of co-creating the universe in the way
we're
that,
participating in it?
Yeah, with that participation.
Yeah, how can we not? How can we? We're creating the world.
Yeah,
we're changing.
Exactly. It makes so much sense. Yeah. So in terms of personal and impersonal models of God, so I remember when I was doing prophecy with you, and you would talk about and the breakthrough experience, and you would talk about your book of gratitudes and how you would write your visions, and you had a sort of a dear God structure to a prayer type of thing, so how do you relate to that, the personal God, like that? Is there something listening to you that you're responding to? Is it
No.
Okay.
I have a very clear little asterisk next to that term God as the grand organized design of the universe.
Yep.
And that it's a non-anthropomorphic, non-personal appreciation of whatever laws of the universe and whatever intelligence that's underlying those laws are, that I'm in appreciation of on a daily basis, because I exist because of those laws.
Yes.
So it's not an anthropomorphic deity that I'm subordinating, please, because I always say that whenever you're infatuated with somebody and you're conscious of the upsides, unconscious of the downsides, you tend to minimize yourself, and you're too humble to admit what you see in them is inside you. And whenever you resent somebody and you're conscious of the downsides, unconscious of the upside, you're exaggerating yourself. When you're minimizing, exaggerating yourself, you're not being yourself. And you want to be loved for who you are, but you're not, as long as you're judging. But the moment you don't judge and you have reflective awareness, and the seer, the seeing, and the seen are the same, and you have real grace for somebody, you have no desire to change them relative to you, no desire to change you relative to them. When you have no desire to change anything, what you're intending now matches what is. And what is the laws of the universe. And now you're in tune with the laws of the universe. That's the state of grace, right? Your name is Grace.
Yes.
Gracias. That, and by the way, the executive center in the forebrain, the most advanced part of the brain, where that you are able to mitigate risks and balance risk reward and set real objectives, which are neutral states, is also called the gratitude center. So scientifically, in brain research, our executive center is our gratitude center. And grace is the autonomic response in all of our musculature to work in harmony and fluidly, gracefully, when our mind has a perfect autonomic balance and we're not judging. So grace is a physical response and a physiological experience for people who are gracefully in movement in relationship to the universe. So I think that is a useful term. But I'm not going to take it as, I don't put an anthropomorphic God on there that's punished. I'm not a believer of any punishing and rewarding deities.
No.
I think that's the most banal state of religious understanding. I'm a believer there's nothing but love, all else was illusion, you might say. And love is the pairs of opposites, the symmetry, the conservation of opposites that are ever present. There's charge parity, everything, all pairs of opposites. In Paul Dirac's work, when I read the Principles of Quantum Mechanics in 1947, when I was 18, that book showed that there was pairs of opposites on energy-matter relationships. That symmetry of those opposites, that synthesis of the dialectic of opposites, is the deity, if you want to call it that, the source of awe in the universe. It's not some being out there. We don't want to anthropomorphize. We don't want to zoomorphize it. We don't even want to astromorphize it. We just want to honor it as it is and realize that whatever the laws of the universe are that make us even possible, be thankful for.
Beautiful. Thank you. When you referred to my name, I actually chose Grace as a surname, deliberately changed my name by deed poll because I wanted that energy in my life of
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. And interestingly enough, my mother, who was a yoga teacher, at one point tried to create, she was creating a new business that she called Science of New Age Synthesis. And really she was on the same journey of trying to unify science and spirituality and so forth, to understand both aspects. So the seeds of interest in all these big questions were there for me from the time I was quite young.
It's inherent.
Yeah.
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 Well, you know, when I get asked by all kind of people, all kind of questions, as you can imagine. And I got asked by a religious person about materialism and about money. And I'd like to add this a little bit. When you exaggerate yourself and you puff yourself up and look down on somebody and have them in the pit and are too proud to admit what you see in them is inside you, and you're conscious of their downsides, unconscious of their upsides, and conscious of your upsides and unconscious of your downsides, and have a contrast between self and other, you narcissistically project onto them an expectation for them to live in your values because you feel superior and you put them as inferior. And now you're trying to get them to live in your values, which is futile and will never occur. If you do it to your customers, you'll go out of business and get humbled for your pride. You do it to your staff, they'll create a union and counterbalance you because of autocracy. And so you learn from nature, the laws of nature, equity theory and equanimity bring you back down and bring you into authenticity. If you minimize yourself and exaggerate somebody, you're conscious of their upsides, unconscious of their downsides. Now conscious of your downsides, not unconscious of your upsides, unconscious of your upsides. Now you're sitting there altruistically sacrificing for them, trying to get you to change into their values. And of course, if you do that, you will have anarchy in your business and you'll never make any profits. So that means your materialism is a reflection of your authenticity or inauthentic state. So when you exaggerate and minimize yourself, you get symptoms from your business to let you know there's no money there. You only get rewarded when you are not proud or shamed and you're authentic. When you're authentic, you communicate what you value equally in terms of what they value, customer, employees, or relationship, and you meet their needs equally to meeting your needs, and you have equanimity within yourself and equity between you and them. And now material is manifested in abundance, and spirituality, which is authentic states of equanimity, is there. Spirit without matter is expressionless. Matter without spirit is motionless. They are one and the same. And so the material sciences and the spiritual sciences, if you will, or mysticisms, they don't have to fight. There's a way of actually putting them together in a mathematical elegance, a beauty that I think every scientist and every theologian deserve to pursue, and not stay with their bias, but to actually transcend it. Immanuel Kant said there's a transcendent mind and an immanent mind. The transcendent mind is able to get to the nominal world that transcends the sensory phenomena. Most people are trapped in the sensory phenomenon, caught in causality, false attribution biases, subjective biases, making opinions. They think it's truth. There's a higher level of understanding that's the truth that goes beyond all of our opinions. That's what I'm interested in. And that doesn't have an argument between science and religion or spirituality and material. There's no argument there. They're one and the same.
That's the beauty that just makes sense, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, here comes that.
An announcement. That's all right. We'll with you again.
Pardon me.
That's all right. Are you on a ship or in a?
I'm on my ship, and we just sailed into Faro, Spain,
right?
From Cadiz, Spain, over the Mediterranean, over into the Atlantic. Went through some pretty good sized waves the last day or two. And so we're here in a beautiful port, fantastic, little beautiful place. And he's made an announcement because they had to do some sort of drill. And right. It wasn't scheduled, so I didn't think it was going to happen at this time, but it happened.
That's all right. We just go with the flow. That's life. Well, Dr. Demartini, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and your generosity and the opportunity to learn from your many, many years of deep study and love, and your determination and commitment to get to truth in all of this. So,
well, thank you. I believe deep inside every human being, there's a knowing.
mm,
And I think that our intuitive, our true nature is to intuitively sift out of our own biases an objective truth, an actuality, and not be trapped by our opinions. So I think it's inherent in everyone, but there are different levels of awareness and different levels of bias, and we're all working through it. And in our own evolution, our conscious evolution, we're eventually discovering this magnificence. We start out as an insignificant, with our opinions, that we end up with a magnificent understanding and wisdom if we pursue it and allow it to unfold. I think that everything in our life is attempting to give us feedback to help us awaken to it.
yeah.
We've been asleep.
Yeah. I started a few years ago, and I'm still working on another novel, you know, for youth, because for some reason I often write for youth. And it's all about that. You know, it's a book called Amazing Jane, and it's about a girl who feels insignificant and is finding her magnificence. And it is just full of the stuff I've learned from you. You know, this particular book, which I'll hopefully finish soon. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Liliane, again for the interview. I hope I didn't make their heads fry by my presentation, because sometimes I get carried away. But thank you for the opportunity to be on your show again.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. A bit of heat is good for all of us. We can replay, right? We can rewind and play again and think it through and go, okay, that's what he means. All right.
Yeah, that's what somebody said. They saw one of my podcasts, not my podcast, but somebody that interviewed me, and it went down the rabbit hole quite a bit. And they said that they got it transcribed, and then they read it, and then they looked up all the words, and then they made sense out of it. And then they were going, oh, now I understand what he was saying.
Yeah.
They had to go through and do that to appreciate what was in it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm madly taking notes here while I'm listening to you, so that I can have a look at it later and go, right, okay, that's what he meant there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. And may you
you
continue with your mastery of sharing with the youth, because the youth is the people that take over in the next generation. So that's fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. And we will speak again down the track. All right.
Okay. Thank you.